people. So I
Mm.
Googled kind of everything. What can you do in insurance? And then I Googled successful women in insurance because all I'd ever known, my grandfather was in insurance in the P&C side, which is totally separate than employee benefits.
Mhm.
And I didn't know anything about the industry too much. So when I Googled successful women in insurance, a list of 12 women came up on this Google search of this article. So I was looking through, and if anybody knows anything about my personality, I'm very blunt. I'm from New York City, right? Or New York. So I was like, boring, 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 right? And then I get to Susan Combs, and she seemed super cool. She was young. I saw her picture. She was talking about how she played sports.
Cool.
Kind of her information there, she was kind of fitting with my personality. So I was like, what are the chances? Let me just email her service line and say, like, we laugh at it all the time. My anniversary is actually coming up in August, and we always pull up the email, and it's like, hi, I'm, a young girl from Long Island. I'm 22 years old. I just got into the industry. I don't know where to turn next. I'm looking for a mentor, blah, 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 like all of this stuff. And she said, why don't you come into New York City and have lunch with me? And
Wow.
forward 7 going on 8 years, I'm now the partner at the firm. So when I say Google kind of
What?
Googled your way to the industry and where you're at, it's kind of just taking that leap of faith in saying, like, if you're not happy where you're at, Google might have the answer for you. And you just have to have the guts to email the damn service line and say, hey, help me. And who knows, somebody will email you back, or maybe they'll ignore you.
Holy crap. Well, shout out to you for advocating for yourself in such a
Yeah.
powerful way. Like you were not interested in accepting the answer no and took
Yeah.
so many risks there, self-educated, and shout out to her for seeing that, like seeing,
Yeah.
what a hustler you were and being willing to mentor you and
Thank
opening
you.
yourself up.
Yeah, I
That
look
is,
back at it now and I'm like, was that really a big deal? But the more people you talk to, you're like, yeah, I guess so.
yeah.
But yeah, I Googled the industry, learned what I needed to know about the industry and kind of the sales tactics, and you built off of Google. So I know you love Google too.
I love Google. I didn't necessarily like become a coach from Google. Like it's not how I ended in this career. My career just had a million different twists and turns, but it's
Hmm.
definitely how we started this podcast.
Yeah.
It's just like let's figure this out and let's find out where we can get the answers. And poor Justin. I'm like, Justin, let's do a podcast. He's like, okay. And he thought I was going to teach him how to do a podcast. I'm like, I don't know how to do it. Let's figure it out. Go Google stuff.
Same.
He's like, what? Well,
Literally, yeah.
hopefully he's listening in the background. Hopefully now he knows that he can Google his way anywhere he wants to go. But was there any fear there that you felt like you had to have it right? You had to know the industry. You had to know exactly what you were doing before you got started?
You know what? Back then, maybe I was so young, I didn't have any fear. But now, when I started my podcast and I did the same thing, I Googled kind of everything you need to know about how to start a podcast. What mic, like, us probably, we're very the type A personality. So we'll Google for the next 3 months. And then when we're ready to make the decision, like, there's no stopping me. Like, I already know my answers because I Googled it all. I was more fearful now, being older, of taking a leap into the podcast world than I was taking the leap of emailing a service line. Because at that point, I was like,
Wow.
what's the worst that can happen? You're just emailing whoever. You don't know this person. They don't know you. The email just says, I'm looking for a mentor. It's not like begging for a job. It was really just me reaching out saying, like, hey, where am I supposed to? Can you give me some advice? Like, you look around the same age, or she was 10 years older than I was. And I was like, is there any advice you can give a younger girl? Should I open up my own thing? What should I do? So leaning in that way and not having the fear, maybe that's what was attractive, is that it was just kind of saying, hey, I need help. And that's okay to ask.
Wow. So I had a question for you that I was thinking of asking, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit.
Okay.
Kind of a dual question. I'd love to know, like, what kind of advice would your older self give that younger self? But it also sounds like your younger self had some ambition that you struggled with now, right? Of like,
Yeah.
just going for it. So what advice would your younger self give your older self and vice versa?
Oh, such a freaking good question. It's
Thanks.
okay to kind of, reimagine your life. So like going in from one complete different industry into another industry, when you're successful in one industry and going into the next one, it was like, what's the worst that can happen? That was the younger self of 22 years old. Like, okay, so what? We try a new career path, and if it doesn't work, you could always go back. You have your clients, everybody loves you, you're great at what you do, but what's the
Yeah.
worst of trying a new career out? And then looking back at my younger self now and all the stuff that happened throughout the years, there's been some real ups and very lows during all those years. But looking back now, it's kind of like I knew we'd make it. I told you we'd make it, and we're here. So it's kind of, I always talk about on my show too, is like looking at your future self, and that's what you're kind of working towards right now, is like you're in your current moment for your future self and to make your younger self proud.